Hello students, Mr. Jen here. Chapter 13, Lesson 1. We're learning about Oregon country. We're going to talk all about it, and then we have a little bit of a different assignment today. But I think you'll like it. It's enjoyable. A little comparing, contrasting, determining, inferencing, stuff like that. I think you'll like it. Let's take a look. So, true story, students. One of the first lessons I ever taught in my history teaching career was actually this lesson. Not this exact lesson, but basically the same lesson at another school. I was student teaching at my alma mater, North Hills Middle School, back in the long, long ago, in ancient times, 2014. Alright, on to the subject. The Oregon country was much more than what would become the state of Oregon that we have today. It included parts of Washington, Idaho, Canada, Wyoming, and even Montana. In the early 1800s, 4 countries laid claim to Oregon: Spain, Britain, Russia, and of course the United States of America. Today we'll explore what the heck happened to this large chunk of land and how we ended up with a good deal of it. Let's take a gander. So first up, let's talk about the Adams-Onis Treaty. So the Adams-Onis Treaty is something that we've talked about briefly before. In 1819, then Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, the second president, made a treaty with Spain, basically grabbing up Florida. But in addition to this, it set borders for New Spain. When these borders were drawn up, which is right here, purple is all New Spain, the Spanish claims to Oregon went away. So they drew their border south of Oregon, and this ends up being what is the border, the northern border of California. So that's where the claims from the Spanish now end after the Adams-Onis Treaty. And then in 1824, Russia gave up any claims it had south of Alaska, leaving just the United States and Britain. In 1818, the U.S. and Britain agreed to joint occupation, which we've mentioned before, meaning British and American settlers could move there. They could cohabitate. All right, let's talk about mountain men. The first people to settle in the Oregon Territory were mountain men. They were basically rugged outdoorsmen types that were in the business of fur trapping. Specifically, they trapped beaver, because beaver were worth the most. Why? Because they were in demand. Beaver skin hats were all the rage at the time, and the pelts were in high demand. The beaver indigenous to Europe had been basically hunted to near extinction, and they weren't as big as American beavers. Basically, the American West, a lot of game there, a lot of beavers, almost untouched, and then beavers were healthy. There was a lot of food, so they were big, and they made the best hats. So the American beavers from the West made the best hats, and so they were in high demand, basically. And so mountain men went out there and they trapped beavers to sell for big buku dollars. Why did beavers make good hats in particular? Because beaver pelts are warm and water resistant. Here's one right here. They do look pretty cool. I tried looking into getting one, and if memory serves, they're very hard to find and super expensive. So I thought it would be awesome, because I like to wear hats in the lessons. Imagine me teaching a lesson with that hat on. It would be sweet, and I could just wear it around town. It's a cool top hat. Anyway, so yes, mountain men, rugged, campy, outdoorsman types, looking for beaver pelts. The mountain men. They often married Native women and even adopted Native American clothing and customs. Eventually, however, the beaver hat craze, like all fads, died down, as did the number of beavers in the region, because they were getting hunted like crazy. The mountain men basically had to figure out something else to do. Some settled down to farm, but others would become guides for settlers that are going to make their way into the Oregon Territory, like 2 paragraphs down. Let's talk about Oregon and Manifest Destiny. In the 1830s, Americans started to head to Oregon. The word on the street was there was some fertile farmland over that way. And if there's one thing we learned all year, is that Americans love the prospect of some fertile farmland. Among the first to settle sort of permanently, and settle down not like the mountain men who were always moving through the woods. The first to settle down were often missionaries, and among the first there were Marcus and Narcissa Whitman. The Whitmans, you always learn about the Whitmans in every 8th grade social studies course. They were basically, they built a mission. So like a mission is like a church sort of thing, and they went about trying to convert the local Native Americans to Christianity and provide medical support. It's something that prominent in the American West, specifically with the Spanish. The Spanish sped up a lot of missions. So the Whitmans, Marcus and Narcissa, set up a mission. Marcus was actually a doctor. And so they started doing their work, trying to convert the Cayuse and giving them some medical treatments. And then things went really south. They went very sour when the natives caught measles from the small white population now in Oregon. They basically blamed the Whitmans, and they had never had measles before, and so it really wrecked them. Much like a lot of the Native American population died of disease because they would catch these diseases from Europe, and their bodies had never built up an immunity to them. Like you and I catch a cold, our bodies are used to it, but if someone had never had a cold before, like they came from Mars or wherever, it might destroy them. And this is what happened. The measles tends to take the elderly and the young, the very old and the very young, and so the Cayuse, a bunch of their kids died, and so they got pretty mad about that, and then they went and they killed the Whitmans and 11 other of the white settlers. And despite this, historical massacre, you might call it, people kept moving to Oregon anyway. So Cayuse Indian killed the Whitmans. You hear about them? They don't care. They came anyways because fertile farmland. In 1843, 1,000 immigrants made the trip into Oregon. They were technically immigrants because they were leaving the United States. Oregon wasn't a part of the United States. By 1843, however, that trickle of people moving turned into basically a wave. It turned into a stream. Thousands would make the 2,000-mile trip from the United States to the Oregon Territory. Families would pack up all they have in covered wagons, which were nicknamed prairie schooners, and head out that way. They were called as such, prairie schooners, because they looked like boats from a distance, and they were crossing the sea of grass that was the Great Plains, which they thought was basically a wasteland more or less at the time. Yep, there's a prairie schooner. The Oregon Trail, that's what that is. You ever play the game, the old game? You always died of dysentery and snake bites. Now, the trek across the nation, the Oregon Trail, was dangerous. There were many dangers and diseases, river crossings, snake bites, Indian attacks, all kinds of things could happen. Not to mention the weather. It was either super hot or super cold. Feel free to watch this video for the lowdown on the Oregon Trail. Cool little video. Made not that long ago, so it's not like old and boring. It's only 3.5 minutes, and it's basically a 3-minute well-done video on the Oregon Trail and the many dangers these people faced. It's cool. I wish we could spend more time in the Oregon Trail. I do have a pretty cool virtual lesson on it, though, and we get to play the game Oregon Trail. You're going to love it. It's one of my favorite lessons to do all year. It's coming up. Manifest Destiny. Let's talk about that. What in the rootin' tootin' Sam hell is Manifest Destiny, Mr. Yund? Manifest Destiny was the idea that the USA would reach from coast to coast. There we go, in frame. Coast to coast. East Coast to West Coast. Or is that East Coast to West Coast? Because I'm on a camera. The thing's reversed. Basically, that the United States would reach from coast to coast. That's the idea of Manifest Destiny. It was our destiny, as in predetermined, that this would happen. This idea was expressed by many people, from common Joe Schmoes to presidents to newspapers. It just seemed certain that the USA was destined to reach the entire span of the continent. One last section in this lesson, 5440, or fight. The last bit of the lesson here, 5440, was the line of latitude where Americans wanted the U.S. to draw a border to split up the Oregon country with Britain. We had been sharing it with Britain, but this sharing land thing was messing with Manifest Destiny. So this little chunk here, we want it to be all ours. President Polk supported this notion, and he compromised with Britain in 1846. Britain didn't like the line 5440, which is the line right there, line of latitude. Like that, goes like this. And so they settled on 49 degrees, which is right here. So 5440 would have been further north. The funny thing is they'd actually rejected this line that they ended up taking 20 years earlier, and we tried to make the same compromise, and they were like, all right, we're cool with that now. The border had been drawn there, so no more joint occupation. Huzzah! Now that's all U.S., baby. All Oregon Territory belongs to the U.S., but not technically a part of the U.S. yet. Territory. It would become a state. So that's it. That's the lesson. Let's bump on to our assignment. It's going to take some explanation. So look at this big old picture here. This painting was done by John Gast in 1872, and it is called American Progress. But it's typically used to express the idea of manifest destiny, what we just talked about. For today's assignment, please answer the following questions with complete sentences. How does the left side of the painting compare to the right side of the painting? And what do you think that represents? Let's take a look here. All right. On the left here, and then the right here. On the right here, I see trains, telegraph lines, farming. There's cities and boats and industry and bridges. It looks kind of like the East Coast over here. This looks a lot like the plains. I see some mountains here, maybe the Rockies, and you notice it gets darker. It's lighter over here, almost like it's civilized, and then darker over here. I see the buffalo, people, covered wagons. These look kind of like people headed west. Oh, there's a dangerous looking bear thing there. And then there's this woman here. I wonder what she represents. Like maybe Western civilization, democracy, technology, something like that. I can see a linear progression here as you head out. So there's some ideas. Kind of looks like it goes from civilized to what they would consider uncivilized, and then lighter, darker, and then here's like maybe Lady Liberty, something like that. So there's some stuff to work with, some tips. You give me your ideas. Make some comparisons, and then tell me what you think they represent. Basically, what does the picture look like it means? That's it. If you have any questions, shoot them my way. If you want me to check your answer, or, whatever. Really, as long as you give it a good old college try and give me something I can read, I'm not going to tell you, no, that's wrong, because it's your interpretation. You just need to give me an interpretation with a couple sentences, please. That's it. All right. We're at 13 minutes. We'll call it there for the day. All right. Have a good one.